channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Kyla and it is time, you guys. It is time, finally. We are getting into fall, which means it is time for all of the autumn reads. So I am here to give you 10-ish recommendations on some extremely atmospheric books that you can read this fall. This is a staple for me when it comes to autumn reads and getting into more horror and thriller, even some fantasy. Like, if the atmosphere is not there, I'm probably not gonna have a good time, or it's not going to give me that autumn fall feeling that I'm looking for. So all of the books that I have picked for you today have some of the best atmosphere that I have ever read. Have everything from fantasy, horror, thriller. We're gonna round it out, and yeah, I think that's it. So let's just go ahead and dive into the list. Oh, also, you best believe I am wearing my first autumn t-shirt. This one is from Book Babe Designs on Instagram. She's incredible. It's a ghost tee, but they're reading. I love it, and this one literally is holding a cat. Like, could you ask for anything more? I don't think so. The real kicker here is going to be how I describe these books. Like, how many times am I gonna say the word atmosphere? Should we make this a coffee drinking game? Like, every single time I say atmospheric, you have to take a sip, or I have to take a sip? Beyond a caffeine buzz, let me tell you. I'm gonna try my best though. I'm gonna try my best. So the first one that I have to talk about is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. This was one of my favorite reads from last year. I actually just redid like my background, and this is out on display because that's how much I love it. Plus this cover is like perfect for autumn. But in this one, we are following Rin. Rin's parents have sadly passed away, so she is kind of like the caretaker of her household. She takes care of her younger siblings as well as her family's graveyard. So already right there, the vibes are there. They are just like scraping by, and they do that by being grave diggers for their little village. But the thing about this village is sometimes the dead don't always stay dead, and they become things called the bone houses. And there's a bit of a curse happening in this town, and one day the bone houses start to kind of take over, and Rin and someone go out on an adventure to try and ixnay this curse, basically, and save her town or her village, etc. So this is a bit fantastical, but it's also extremely dark and gritty, and dare I say, the atmosphere is top notch. With the bone houses, they are just so beyond creepy, and the way they have to go about saving this town, it just pulls in from every single environment. And then you mix in the graveyard and all of the different places that they go on the adventure that they have to go on. I call it an adventure. It's really what that sounds very happy. It's quite dark, but the way that that pulls together is amazing. And this, like I said, the writing is incredible. You really can visualize this small village. You can visualize the characters. You can visualize these bone houses, and everything just kind of comes to life in the writing, and I loved it. It's one of my favorites, like I said, of last year. I think it is so underrated. So underrated. This is definitely not talked about enough, and the fantasy isn't too much where someone who's not used to reading fantasy wouldn't be able to understand it. You could absolutely follow along and still have a great time if you are not a fantasy reader. So I definitely highly recommend this one. If you have not checked it out, please do so this autumn, because it is the perfect read for that time of year. The next one that I have to talk about actually caught me by surprise. I wasn't sure that it was going to be my thing, but when I read it, oh my god, I just got sucked into this story so much, and I loved the direction it went in. I absolutely loved it. I know it wasn't everyone's favorite, but I personally loved the direction that it went, and that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is a historical horror, and I really wasn't sure if that was going to be my genre, but this is so consumable for being a historical horror. In this one, we are following Noemi, and Noemi one day gets a letter in the mail from her cousin, basically begging her to like come save her from her new marriage. She's like, my family's kind of weird, please come save me from this situation. So Noemi takes off and heads out to this mansion, which has this huge history behind it. And when she gets there, she realizes that the family and the mansion are not quite what they seem. And this whole story basically is centered around this mansion and its history, and it is so fascinating. I mean, it is centered around this family as well, but the atmosphere of this mansion is so creepy, and then you add in like this eerie family on top of it, and it just, ooh, it gets like in your bones. And like I said, I loved the direction of the like where this went. It wasn't something that I was really expecting, but I loved it. I think it was so cool, such a unique spin on like that haunted house kind of trope. And oh my gosh, the story just like brings the mansion to life, where you really feel like you were there and truly like thrust into the story. And I just absolutely loved it. It was creepy, it was engaging, the writing is extremely well done. I was fully in this story from the beginning, and I got really invested in these characters as well. I just absolutely loved it. It's extremely gothic, it's extremely atmospheric, and I just had a great time while reading it. Similarly, along the same lines, we have The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This is very similar to Mexican Gothic in it's a gothic historical fiction horror, and while the vibes are similar, the story is vastly different. Again though, we are taking place in a mansion. This one takes place in the aftermath of the Mexican War of Independence, and we are following Beatrice as her father was executed in the aftermath of that, and she gets a proposal from a very distinguished higher up, and she accepts the proposal and moves into his hacienda, which is essentially a huge mansion. And when she gets there, everything is not as it seems. The mansion is not as it seems. The family is not as it seems. And like, I am not a historical fiction gal, okay? That is not my genre. It's not something I gravitate towards, but I really enjoyed this one. Similarly with Mexican Gothic, this one I feel like is a little bit more heavy-handed on the history because it is centered around the aftermath of the Mexican War of Independence. So we do have that sense, but I really enjoyed it, and if for someone who's not a historical fiction reader, that's saying a lot. Again, the eeriness of this hacienda and the family itself and everything unraveling as not what it seemed is so creepy, but so well done and really just engulfs you in the story. It also brings a little bit of magic in there as well, which I found really enjoyable and really like kept me gripped throughout the story. Again, this is one where you really get invested in the characters really quickly, especially Beatrice and her mother and like the relationship that they go through. There's also a few other things that happen like within this town that she's in that I found really interesting. Overall, I just really enjoyed this one, and again, you have that gothic atmosphere that really just sets the tone for everything, and it is just the perfect autumn read. Next, we have a book that not a lot of people recommend, and I can see why, but at the same time, it was one of my favorite reads when I read it, and it is weird, and it is hard to kind of grasp the concept of it, and it's one of those books that everyone kind of has their own theory about, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I loved this. It is weird, it is twisted, it doesn't really make sense until it does, and I love that about it. This is a fantasy, but it's also one of those books that just has you on the edge of your seat the entire time, trying to figure out what the heck is happening, and you can't really figure it out until the last minute, and then it hits you, and it's one of the best reveals that I have ever read. Now, I know that people have an issue with this book, and I understand, because I feel like some people really let down by the twist. I personally took it in a different direction. This book is such a conversation starter. I actually had one of my best friends read this book, and she took it a different way and didn't really enjoy it as much as I did, but once we sat down and talked about it, she was like, I never thought about the ending like that, and it was just such a fun conversation because I got to explain like why I loved it, and that really hit home with her, so it was just a fun time. This would be a perfect pick for a book club, and I'm gonna keep the synopsis of this one super vague because I really do believe that this book is best gone into without knowing anything, or at least very minimal, which is how I went into it, and I had a great time. This one, we are following Piranesi, and Piranesi lives in this house that is ever-changing. A door will not be in the same place twice. The rooms can change theme, they can change atmosphere, they can change at any point, and he seemingly lives alone in this house with one other. He is called the Other, but he only gets to see the Other twice a week. Other than that, he's just left to like his own devices. And one day he finds something and makes him think that the house isn't as it seems. That is all I'm going to say. That is all you need to know going into this book, but please know, like I said, this book is weird, it's twisted, the writing style is unlike anything I have ever read before. It takes a second to get into. I highly recommend listening to the audiobook while reading this because the writing style is so different. If you can push past the writing style and how kind of choppy it is, this is an incredible story. And like I said, the twist at the end is so good, but mainly we have this house, right, which is so cool that it like changes all the time. It's ever changing. Piranesi's trying to figure out what is going on with this house, like why does it change the way it is, but every single time he goes into a room it's different, and he explains it and like every little detail. So of course this is one of the most atmospheric books that I have ever read because of how different this house is. Again, and then you have this reveal at the end. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna stop talking because I don't want to give anything away, but it is so good. I need more people to read this book. If you have it, please give it a try. I know it's different, but if you can push past it, it's truly one of these books that I think about all the time, and like I know I will never forget. There's a theme with these books, I feel like. I feel like this also could have been the list of like the most Gothic reads that I could have chosen, because that's also a huge theme throughout all of these. I mean, Piranesi is not quite Gothic, and some of the other ones I have, but like a lot of them also have extremely Gothic vibes. And that goes for our next one as well, which is Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. This is one that I read last year, and while this one was just okay for me, I think I gave this one 3 stars. It was my first introduction to Alex E. Harrow. The writing in here is incredible, and the atmosphere is absolutely top-notch with this Starling House. It's extremely Gothic. I loved being in this house with her. It was creepy, it was eerie, we get the history of this house. This one we are following Opal, and Opal is on her own basically with her younger brother, so she really is like looking out for him and doing everything she can to just scrape by. And when Opal was younger, she was obsessed with this book. What is it called? The Underland? Yeah, The Underland, and the author of The Underland went missing in this town forever ago, but of course the mansion still stands, and we come across Arthur, who needs some help. He lives in the mansion now, he needs some help, so Opal takes it upon herself to go and take the job to basically like clean up this mansion. And then some things start unfolding in the mansion and around it. And Opal was like obsessed with this book when she was younger. So she already knows like the history attached to this mansion. She's like eager to like go into this mansion and start taking care of it and kind of uncover the mystery maybe of what happened to this author. And the story takes off from there. This writing style is so good. Like the aesthetic of the inside of this book and how it's set up is so satisfying to the reading experience. I don't know how to describe it, but like just the aesthetic of the overall book is absolutely incredible. Like we have these cool, like, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but like the cool chapter starts. There's also like a border going on in here. We also do get some footnotes as well, which is not always my favorite thing, but in this book I think it worked. And again, we have this mansion that is extremely gothic and where a lot of this story takes place, and it is so fascinating. It's so creepy. It's so eerie. It's atmospheric. We have Opal as she's like going around cleaning this house, so she's explaining everything that she's seeing and experiencing. And I just loved being like in the mansion with her and those scenes. So while the overall plot was like just okay for me, the atmosphere in here, like, you cannot deny. It is one of the best. I absolutely loved being in this mansion, and I think this is the perfect read for fall. My next few I actually don't have physical copies of to show you, so I will just put an image on the screen for you. But the first one is the first in a series that I desperately need to be continuing this autumn because it grabbed me in, and oh my god, it's one that I still like I think about all of the time, and that is Caraval. This book was everything that I wanted the Night Circus to be and wasn't. It's amazing, and I think about it all of the time. If you are looking for a book that gives you those circus vibes, that gives you a fantasy romance that's not like too heavy on the romance, that is an adventure, that is rooted in sister relationships, that is dark, that is gritty, again, that gives you those perfect circusy magic vibes, this is the book for you. Like, I genuinely, my jaw was like on the floor while I was reading this book. I loved it that much. It's actually a crime I haven't continued in the series yet, but I was saving it for like when fall came around again because I just feel like it is the perfect time of year to read it. In this one, we are following two sisters. We have Tella and Scarlet, and they live on a tiny, tiny, tiny little island with their basically jerk of a father, and Scarlet has this dream of going to see Caraval, this show that is just infamous, and she's always had this dream of going, but her dream is quickly squandered when her father sets up an arranged marriage for her. But Tella is like, She enlists the help of a sailor, and they go off to give Scarlet that gift of seeing the show before she's kind of forced into this arranged marriage. But the second they get there, Tella gets kidnapped, and Scarlet spends the rest of the book trying to figure out what is going on. But it is a book of magic, it is a book of deception, it is a book of fantasy, it is a book of mystery, and it is, oh my gosh, it's so good. It is so good. I know this is such a backlist, so many of you have probably already read it, but if you haven't, I need you. I need you to pick it up this fall. It is the perfect time, like, of year to read it. There's just something about this, like, dark, gritty mystery with also having this magical element on top of it, and the vibes of this show. I don't know what about it screams autumn, but it does, and it is the perfect time of year. And again, this is another book where you literally can visualize everything. And when it comes to atmosphere, like, that's it for me. If I can visualize and, like, feel like I am really in this book, and that sets the tone of the atmosphere, then I'm like, it's top notch, and that's what this book does. I need to be reading the rest of the series immediately. Next, we have a book that I didn't personally love overall, overall. However, if you are looking for a book with atmosphere, this has to be at the top of the list. And this is a me problem with this book. This isn't like, this book is well loved, and it's House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. Honestly, at the time, I rated this a 2.5, but it is a book that I think about often, so I probably should up it to like a 3.5, because I do think about it all of the time. In this book, we are following Marion. She lives basically in the slums and is just scraping to get by and like living a really, really, really tough life. And one day she sees an ad in the paper to become a blood maid at this really like prestigious place. So she takes it upon herself to go and answer the ad, and she gets the job as a blood maid, and the story takes off from there. So it includes vibes of like vampires, but also the house that she ends up working at. It's a place that I think about all the time. It has stuck in my brain. I feel like all of these just have a house. Like, is that really it? Is the atmosphere just the house? Maybe. This one in particular, the descriptions of this house and the things that go on there, you can't unsee it in your brain. It sticks with you, and that is top-notch writing. That is top-notch atmosphere, so it had to be on this list, despite me maybe not loving like the outcome of the plot as much. There are a lot of people who have given this book 5 stars, so really take what I say about that with a grain of salt and just go into this book knowing that if you are going in for it, for the atmosphere, you are going to be served atmosphere. It is so dark. It is so creepy. It's queer. Like I said, the description of this house will stick with me. Description of the people, even like down to what they're wearing, even to what the outside looks like every little bit of this story is something that you can visualize and that can come to life while you're reading it, and not necessarily like in the greatest way, because it's not a good time. This is a very dark story, but I really got like engulfed in it, and I just thought it was so incredibly well done. And again, one I think about, so like, should I up my rating? Probably, but if you have not read this, please do so this autumn, because it is horrifying, it is gothic, it is vampires, and damn, it is some really good atmosphere. I cannot let this list go on without recommending a classic, because classics do have some of the best atmosphere. Their writing tends to be a little bit overly descriptive, if I'm being honest. I've read a lot of classics that have really good atmosphere, but the one that sticks out to me the most is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I mean, is there any better time of year to read this than the autumn in the spooky season? I do not think so. And again, this is one of those books that like overall the plot did fall a little bit flat for me, but you cannot deny that the creepiness and the atmosphere of this book is some of the best and has stood the test of time for so many people. I mean, it is a cult classic for a reason. And to me, that reason is the atmosphere of this book. If you don't know, for some weird reason, I don't know where you've been, but if you don't know, this book follows I believe four different characters as they get to have this like encounter at Hill House. Basically, they're going to go have a stay there. They're all from like different walks of life, and they are basically getting like interviewed about their experience there and like what's happening at Hill House and like absorbing the history and that kind of thing. That's really all you need to know about it. But Hill House itself is basically like a character in this book. Like, it stands at the forefront of this book and makes The Haunting of Hill House what it is. I also would recommend the show. If you want to do that, you can do that too. But if you're looking to read something with incredible atmosphere, this book does have it. It's creepy, it's eerie. This house is definitely unsettling in so many ways, and each character experiences it a little bit differently, which I think is really fun. And it's just a classic book that I feel like everyone should have the experience of reading. I mean, if you haven't at this point, definitely put it on your TBR for this autumn because, I mean, there's no other time to read it, really. This is a perfect read for October, and the atmosphere, you just can't deny. It's, like I said, withstood the test of time. It's so good. My last two books I have talked about so many times on this channel that I feel like I can just speed past them, but I can't let this video go without mentioning them because they are two of my favorites of all time, but they also equally both have incredible atmosphere, and they are Belladonna. This is a Gothic fantasy, and it is incredible. And then we have A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. There's like, these just really fight for like my top two favorite books at the moment. You throw in Divine Rivals and oh my word, they're still top-notch competition, but oh my gosh, the atmosphere in both of these is incredible. Vastly different, but both I have talked about so many times. But this one, Gothic fantasy, we are following Signa, who has been raised by a bunch of different guardians over the time, and she has this thing where she can like see and talk to death. And one day, the latest of guardians, they're all just basically after her money at this point, but her latest guardian passes away and she gets thrown into the mix of her other relatives called the Hawthorns, which, like, that is my maiden name, so automatically I was already drawn to this book. I was like, me and you, the Hawthorns. And she is staying at this place called Thorngrove. It is like their estate, and it's very dark, it's very creepy. We are following a mystery throughout this. Like I said, I've talked about it like a million times, so I don't feel like I need to go into like huge explanation, but it's some of the best atmosphere, especially for this house, and like her talking to death just really brings this like dark eeriness to this story that like I can't shake. I cannot shake it. I think about this book on a daily basis. It's why it stood at like the top of some of my favorites of all time, if not my favorite of all time. It's just one I think about all the time. If you're looking for a book with incredible atmosphere, you need to read this. And then same goes for A Study in Drowning. Like I said, they're different atmosphere, but they're both equally top-notch. This is also Gothic fantasy, but in a slightly different way. In this one, we are following Effie. Effie is in school to be a architect, but it's really, she wants to be a writer, but in this day and age, women are not allowed to go to the writing school, so she goes to the architect school hoping that like she can kind of gain some skills there. And one day she wins this like project to go and redesign this manor, which she thinks is kind of odd, but she really wants to go at the same time because it is the manor of an author that she was obsessed with as a child. So she wants to go and like experience the place where he wrote his stories and had that experience because she wants to feel connected to him, and the story takes off from there. This takes place on an island, so it's a bit different in atmosphere, but again, with the manor and the island vibes, it's very dark, it's very gritty, there are some heavy topics in here. It's just, again, one of my favorite books of all time. If you have not read it, I need you to do it. I need you to read this because it's so good, and it is the perfect time of year to read both of these. They both give off that kind of Gothic fantasy vibe, but also equally have incredible atmosphere, and like, I could talk about them until I'm blue in the face, but I've talked about them so much at this point. Y'all know I love them. If you haven't read them based on my recommendations in the past, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. So it's time. It's time. You need to read. I'm going to say both of them. You need to read both of them, okay? Don't just pick one or the other. Put them both on your TBR for this autumn. That is all of my recommendations for you. I think there's 11 there, maybe-ish, somewhere in there, of atmospheric reads for you to put on your TBR for this autumn season. It is the perfect time of year to just cozy up, get a drink, turn down the lights, and really get creeped out. And these books will definitely do that for you. They will make you feel like you are in the story, and like, isn't that what we all love and want. I hope that you put some of these on your TBR. If you do, please let me know which ones you are going to check out. And if you have any more atmospheric reads, any other recommendations, please leave them in the comments for everyone to go through. I could use some more to check out. I mean, my TBR is long for this season, but I can always leave room for more. We all know it's ever growing, so I would love your recommendations in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Do not forget to subscribe if you are not already. Turn on the bell so you never miss a video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
With you and I, the future